Schumacher wins the Spanish Grand Prix, a crushingly dominant victory for Ferrari.
Ferrari are synonymous with Formula One, the color, the badge, and the fans. The manufacturer has become iconic, and perhaps the most recognizable team in the history of the sport, both within the paddock and beyond. But Formula One is not just a part of the brand, it's the most important aspect of the company's success, serving as one of the most effective marketing and branding strategies in the history of sport, with the success on track, fueling growth for the manufacturer off track too. Ever since the first Ferrari was built in 1947, the purpose was to fund the racing team. But over the past 7 decades, the prancing horse has become a symbol of wealth, opulence, and status, with their latest lineup of cars starting at over $200,000, and their profits continuously growing year over year. But with little money being spent on advertising, the prestigious car company is still reliant on their racing arm to bring interest and exposure to the brand, turning the manufacturer from just another car company into a cultural brand that appeals to all levels of society. This is the story of why Ferrari needs Formula One. The story starts in 1929, when Enzo Ferrari founded Scuderia Ferrari, a racing team of top drivers that was backed by Alfa Romeo, the team that Enzo had driven for since 1920. The team took their first victory at the 1935 German Grand Prix, but disbanded just 2 years later due to a lack of funding. But after the Second World War, the team was reformed in 1947 in Maranello as a fully fledged constructor. The new team was funded by the sale of a limited supply of Ferrari road cars, which had entered production as a means of getting the racing team off the ground. Within 2 years, they had their biggest triumph to date, winning the 1949 Le Mans 24-hour race, and just 1 year later, they were on the grid at the Monaco Grand Prix, the second ever race of the inaugural Formula One World Championship. But Enzo Ferrari's ambition wasn't just limited to getting a spot on the grid. He wanted to win, and he was ruthless about driving high performance from the team. He famously described himself as an agitator of men, and he even went as far to hire more drivers than cars, to make sure there was constant pressure on drivers to win. The intention was clear: if you didn't perform, you'd lose your seat, and Enzo was obsessive with his drive towards success, and it paid off. Over the next 60 years, Ferrari won 15 drivers' championships, including 2 titles for Niki Lauda, 5 consecutive titles between 2000 and 2004 for Michael Schumacher, and most recently, the 2007 World Championship with Kimi Räikkönen. They also bagged 16 constructor championships and a record 243 race wins, making Scuderia Ferrari the most successful team in Formula One history. But why does this matter? 2 words: Il Tifosi. Success has fueled the passion of Ferrari fans, and the Tifosi have become synonymous within Formula One. The red wall can be seen at every race on the calendar, accounting for over 400 million people worldwide, with 84% of Italian motorsport fans claiming to be part of the Tifosi, as they're known within the sport. But it's not just within Italy. Ferrari have managed to gain significant traction in emerging markets like China, India, and USA, where they claim between 24% and 58% of the overall fan base. China represents a massive opportunity for Ferrari, with the largest number of F1 fans of any market, and room for growth, both from a fan and commercial perspective. The same can be said for the USA too. Formula One has exploded in popularity in recent years as a result of shows like Drive to Survive, and new races being added to the calendar, including Miami and Las Vegas. This enormous fan passion has fueled growth in sponsorships, commercial opportunities, and general brand awareness. For instance, in 2021, Ferrari generated nearly $500 million in sponsorship, commercial, and brand revenue, an increase of nearly $100 million since 2020, when the whole sector suffered some setbacks after the coronavirus pandemic. In fact, the fan base is so strong and iconic that Formula One reportedly pays Ferrari $35 million annually. And when you're the most recognizable brand and team in one of the world's largest sports, advertising just isn't necessary. The fans are doing it for you. But for Ferrari, the fans are only a small part of the marketing strategy. Fans provide the vehicle for the brand to grow, but it still needs fuel. And that's where the money comes in. Ever since Enzo Ferrari started producing road cars in 1947, the purpose has always been focused on funding the Formula One team. But being a small manufacturer, Ferrari have never had the scale of other car brands like Ford, Volkswagen, or Honda, which has led to a limited supply of road cars being made to order. This meant that from the start of production in 1947, when only 2 cars were made, demand has outstripped supply, and it hasn't changed since. In fact, what started off as a function of resources has become a key commercial strategy. Ferrari now ensure that demand constantly outstrips supply by working on both sides of the equation. On the supply side, they intentionally limit production, with the company shipping less than 10,000 units on average over the past 10 years. This compares to other publicly traded manufacturers in Formula One, like Mercedes and Alpine, who sold 2.4 million and 1.6 million cars respectively in 2021. And with supply controlled internally, Ferrari rely on the Tifosi and the Formula One team to drive demand externally. Given the size of the Tifosi and the performance, glamour, and wealth of Formula One, it isn't difficult to generate desire and demand for Ferrari vehicles. By focusing on exclusivity and vehicle design, they are able to create an image of Ferrari as a sought-after luxury car, which, in turn, creates conditions for the Veblen effect. This is essentially where people begin to pay more, simply because of the perceived status gain from paying a higher price. Of course, all this drives revenue up, and gross margins have grown from an already high 47% to 52% over the past 10 years alone. And this limited supply model actually provided protection for the company during the pandemic. When your customer base is the world's richest, and you don't need as many supplies as a larger brand for manufacturing, pandemic economics can actually work in your favor. By only shipping a few thousand cars each year and giving customers just a handful of models to choose from, they've avoided the supply chain disruptions that have forced larger automakers to pull back on production and led to many manufacturers experiencing falling revenues or having to withstand significant losses. And with the world's 2,755 billionaires increasing their cumulative wealth by $5 trillion last year alone, Ferrari's target customer base didn't contract, it expanded. And the decision to limit supply, coupled with recent success on the track, has been reflected in the company's finances too. Ferrari generated over $4 billion in 2021, up from just over $2 billion 10 years ago, and the stock price is up 100% over the past 5 years. This is even more impressive when you compare it to the S&P 500, which is up just 65% over the same period. And when you compare this to other publicly traded automakers in Formula 1, the growth is even more stark. This impressive return has been helped by the decision to limit supply, but has also enabled Ferrari to continue to fund their Formula 1 team without the need to resort to any drastic measures like some other teams in the sport. For instance, McLaren has started to launch other items, like shoes, and even recently had to raise $150 million from investors due to their low cash flow over the past few years. Ferrari haven't had any of those issues, and their future looks bright with the team's improvements on track, only serving to fuel demand. After an impressive start to the 2022 season, with 4 victories in the first half of the season, the company reported record earnings of $1.3 billion in the second quarter of the year. This was fueled by a record number of cars being shipped, and means they're on track to reach nearly $5 billion in total revenue in 2022. Not to mention the record numbers being added to the Tifosi as markets expand in the USA and China. This brings us back full circle. The marketing strategy that emerged almost accidentally from Enzo Ferrari's initial need to fund his team after the Second World War has become one of the most effective brand strategies in the history of world sport. Success creates the fans, and fans reinforce the brand. The brand becomes exclusive, exclusivity drives prices up, higher prices fuel the racing team's success, the racing team's success draws in more fans, and the cycle continues. The final piece of the puzzle is finding decent Formula 1 strategists, but that's a topic for another video.